3 John begins in verse 1 in the ESV in this way. The elder to the beloved Gaius, whom I love in truth. Beloved, I pray that all may go well with you, and that you may be in good health, as it goes well with your soul. For I rejoiced greatly when the brothers came and testified to your truth, as indeed you are walking in the truth. I have no greater joy than to hear that my children are walking in the truth. Beloved, that is a faithful thing you do in all your efforts for these brothers, strangers as they are, who testify to your love before the church. You will do well to send them on their journey in a manner worthy of God. For they have gone out for the sake of the name, accepting nothing from the Gentiles. Therefore, we ought to support people like these, that we may be fellow workers for the truth. I have written something to the church, but Diotrephes, who likes to put himself first, does not acknowledge our authority. So, if I come, I will bring up what he is doing, talking wicked nonsense against us. And not content with that, he refuses to welcome the brothers, and also stops those who want to, and puts them out of the church. Beloved, do not imitate evil, but imitate good. Whoever does good is from God. Whoever does evil has not seen God. Demetrius has received a good testimony from everyone and from the truth itself. We also add our testimony. And you know that our testimony is true. I had much to write to you, but I would rather not write with pen and ink. I hope to see you soon, and we will talk face to face. Peace be to you. The friends greet you. Greet the friends, each by name. It's a lovely letter, and at times I think we focus in on maybe one or two key phrases from the text. We might think about Diotrephes when we're in a difficult circumstance. We might ponder the great joy included in the concept of no greater joy that I would have than to find my children walking in the truth. But there's actually a whole lot more going on in this letter. And over the course of the last few weeks, as I prepared for this particular sermon, I took the time to read 3 John a lot more than I had before. I really made it basically be on repeat in my head. Started with reading it just to myself, included listening to it being read to me in my regular listen to stuff time where I put on either podcasts or the scriptures or other things to listen to. And I thought I noticed something, and then I caught this little detail in something I was reading. There are 4 ideas that show up in John's letter here on the basis of the people involved. Because he talks about 4 people here. Gaius, Diotrephes, Demetrius, and John. That actually forms the structure of the letter. He's just talking about his relationship and experiences, whether from his side at the end or with the others at the beginning. And in so doing, he gives what amounts to some incredibly practical insight. Things that probably go beyond our one or two dipping our toes in the text events that we do from time to time. Because he is really helping us better appreciate some aspects of our own faithfulness in light of a variety of spiritual challenges. Not just the surface level ones, but ones that go deeper to the core of our identity. So he's going to help us, beginning from the top of it, understand how our faithful living, our decisions, our choices to do right, is a reflection of our overall spiritual health. Now, this is a way to say, hey, am I doing what I need to be doing? I know I've listened to God's word. I've been trying really hard to do God's instructions in my life to be an obedient servant, this is one of the ways where you can evaluate progress. If I'm doing these kind of things. And John shows some of that there. Secondly, he connects us to an aspect of spiritual service that at times in our disconnected, highly digitized culture is difficult. He reminds us that hospitality is gospel work. It's the work of spreading the good news. And he does so in a couple of particular ways, even while dealing with what would obviously be a couple of cantankerous settings. He tells us that when you welcome and support those who spread the gospel, you are participating with them in that work. You're a fellow worker with them. I want you to think about what that means from the various ways you examine things. Over the years, you have probably, if you've been a Christian for any amount of time, been to a few gospel meetings. I don't know if you keep lists of that. That's one of the few things I don't have a spreadsheet for. I do not know how many gospel meetings I've been to. I have a lot of other spreadsheets that calculate a lot of other things. But every time you've done that, every time you show up to hear someone preach, you are giving that preacher the very best gift you can. It's better than all, this is the time of year where grandparents and parents very often will ask their kids, hey, what do you want as a gift? And you try to figure all this stuff out. And they always have great things. I'm like, depending on the kids, I want this, I want that, I want this. You reach a point in your life where I don't want anything. Most dads get there pretty quick. I don't want anything. I don't want any stuff. I don't want to carry it around anymore. The very best gift you give to a gospel preacher is your presence, is showing up. It's better than anything else. And so when you go across a state, a county, even across the street to show up and listen, knowing well that maybe you've heard the message before, maybe it's like this guy's first gospel meeting ever, first sermon ever, and the standard is really, the bar's low. And you show up and you support him, that's the very best gift. And so extend that forward and think about what it means when you welcome and support those who spread the gospel, from the little steps of showing up to the grand steps of taking them aside and telling them, I appreciate the work that you're doing. I know that it's hard. I know that it's a struggle. I know that the weight you carry is substantial and significant. And beyond, you are now actually in the pulpit with them from that point forward. You're actually with them on the plane when they fly from Atlanta to Manila. And you support their work that way. You're with them when they go door to door in Tigagaraw. You're with them when they go to New Zealand. You're with them in Malawi and in Africa. You're with them everywhere the gospel is preached because you supported them somewhere on that journey. John is telling us that there in this text, that this is going on. Thirdly, you're also going to learn, especially when we think about all four of the people there, Gaius, Diotrephes, Demetrius, and John, when you are in a position of leadership, you are going to reveal your heart by your actions very quickly, especially in the contrast between how Diotrephes interacts and Demetrius interacts. There's part of our brain, and part of mine as well, that thinks what's really important is to have an accurate message, to make sure that what you say clearly reflects the text, clearly reflects what's needed, and has to be 100% right on the line. But that's not enough. I get it technically, yes, that's part of the standard. But what matters is that the character that goes along with it is genuine too. Because if you're accurate to the text, but you have horrible character, you undermine all that good work you've done. You ruin it. That's just as important as the other. And that's being revealed here in the contrast between Diotrephes and Demetrius. Independent of what we think about their decisions, it's revealed. And so it is with Gaius and John as well. The smallest of actions, then, reveal to us perhaps the biggest truths. In this third letter, this is the kind of pull out of things, John writes to his beloved friend Gaius, and he tells us with vivid pictures what it means to live out the truth of the gospel in practical ways, even when things are difficult. This sermon caps off our journey from January till now, when we've kind of explored the depth of John's letters to the churches. Themes of love, surety, or trust have been playing out in each of these segments, either in 1st and 2nd John, and now in the capstone of 3rd John. And he brings all of those principles of commitment, of diligence, of zeal, of love, forgiveness, and compassion together at the end. So I want you to think about that when we pay attention to these 4 fellows. 4 guys just show up in this letter. Each of them bring to the table at least one important idea for us to take home and to think about. Gaius, for our purposes right now, represents a life that is now shaped by gospel truth. He shows that truth transcends idea and becomes life. Because his generosity is so consistent, he's welcoming, in essence, people he does not, strangers in the strangest sense. People who have rejected this world, are seeking a heavenly reward, has no prior connection to him, and they treat him so well, it goes back to John. Somehow or another, John hears of this, and is able to write back a second time. Now, that might happen today in about 14 seconds. Hey man, made it to the house. John says it's chill, we stay with him. I'll hit you up in the morning. At least that's how some of my children text me about stuff. So it can happen in 14 seconds with a text message. That is not how conversation and communication went in the 1st century. A letter is written, a courier is sent, maybe it goes with Roman officers, and it takes some time. And you have to invest in it, because it's not free to send a letter. Nor is it even the still cheap but feeling expensive cost of $1 or so for stamps. So this was a big investment to tell them this news. And so you've got someone who has now built a reputation of generosity so consistent that it goes everywhere. It's a fulfillment, if you will, of what it says in Hebrews 13 and verse 2, where there's the admonition that, hey, go do this, of do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers. For thereby, here's the weird part, some have entertained angels unaware. Now, that's a challenging text there, especially if you have a very earthly worldview. It says, wait a minute. Does that mean what I think it means? Well, whatever it means in Hebrews 13 is exactly what it means in Hebrews 1. And if there are angels there, then the angels are angels here. And you're like, well, wait a minute. When did that happen? Again, it says at the close, you won't know. So that's one of those points where you just got to give it up. You're never going to figure that edge of that out. You just know that that mystery plays out in life. But the admonition covers everybody else too. And imagine building a habit so consistent that you are so inclined toward hospitality that you don't know the people who have been in your home. Some of them you didn't know before you met them, don't know them afterwards, and their presence was, in fact, a representation of a miracle. Because I consider in part the divine manifestation of a spiritual being a little weird enough to call on the edge of miraculous. Truth, then, when lived out, should become a light for everyone else. And hospitality, in a practical way, is, in the very largest sense, a ministry, a service that Christians engage in as part of their faith in any way possible. I remember very specifically talking with Rhoda Flatt, who was one of the longtime members of the congregation at Jerry Whitson Road up in Cookeville, Tennessee. And for years, probably decades at that point, whenever there was a gospel meeting, she would gather up all the college kids, take the visiting preacher, and take him to the same restaurant downtown. She got to a point, though, where she physically couldn't do that. It was just too much for her. So she took me aside, and she hands me this envelope and says, "This is what you're going to do. You're going to gather up all the college kids and the preacher, and you're going to take him to dinner." And so I started doing that job for her. That's what hospitality looks like. Service to others in ways that even sometimes exceed what you think you would do. And by the way, we did not get to pick the restaurant. It was still going to be the same restaurant. We were doing what we were told. And it was always a joyous experience, always a good time. And it allowed us to participate in the work of the gospel. Matthew chapter 10, verses 40 and following read this way. "Whoever receives you receives me, and whoever receives me receives him who sent me. The one who receives a prophet because he is a prophet will receive a prophet's reward. The one who receives a righteous person because he is a righteous person will receive a righteous person's reward. And whoever gives one of these little ones even a cup of cold water because he is a disciple, truly I say to you, he will by no means lose his reward." It threads back together to the teaching of Jesus on the relational aspect of Christianity. This is an admonition and a reminder. It ties together to Hebrews a little bit, but it also is a bigger picture of Christianity. There's always a challenge in our life that says, I don't need the church. It's just so stressful. I don't need anyone else. Or it becomes hard to get to church. My body is not the same way that it once was. Here's the thing, though. Christianity is never a solo gig. You're not going to get there on your own. It just doesn't work that way. You say, but wait a minute. My obedience is my own. Absolutely. And God calls us, commands us to be with our brethren. And I'll say that it's especially valuable when it's hard for you. It's hard to recognize that when it's hard for you, you actually may not be carrying a weight that's just your weight. You don't realize it, but you're actually probably carrying a little bit of somebody else's load too. And underneath the two of you, somebody's carrying both of you. That's the shared nature of Christianity. That's the expectation of the relational attributes of Jesus' teaching in Matthew 10. And that's the pinnacle of behavior that's praised in part of Gaius as he receives people he doesn't know who are following Christ. And he's told to send them on, send them forward. And incumbent with that idea is he's going to help them go forward. He's going to make provision in that process. The text continues there and moves us from Gaius to Diotrephes. By the way, I think most of the time when I started retroactively thinking about 3 John, Diotrephes is pretty much my first thought. Oh, it's Diotrephes' text. Only 2 verses of 15, small letter to begin with, a smaller segment that's latched in my brain. But it is more broadly than we tend to narrow its space there. It's a warning against pride. Imagine being John, who writes to the church, and one guy says, nope, I'm not going to pass that on. One guy who is so belligerent in his behavior, even though it may not be in his speech, that he starts not only restricting John's letters, but everyone else's too. And I do love the way the ESV translates the text here, starts talking wicked nonsense. By the way, everyone says, oh, I love the King James Version, it's so poetic. Listen, this is the gold moment of the New Testament for the ESV version. This is the best translation of the text you're going to find, and it is literally the best reading of this passage. Wicked nonsense. Diotrephes here becomes a cautionary tale for any person in a local congregation because his pride ruptures fellowship. It ruins and eliminates, in a very deep sense, the truth that needed to be spoken in that congregation. And it isolated this church from the writers of the New Testament and the prophets that could speak before them. Here's the thing, though. It's entirely possible for Diotrephes to believe that he's the one supporting the truth. How many times have you heard someone come up and say, well, no, we can't let that guy speak here because I'm concerned about what he says. There's a needle being kind of woven through a difficult circumstance every time you make that decision. It's power of pride versus the power of humility in practice. You might even think about it this way. Imagine someone who has to be at the center of every decision and then is unwilling to listen, quick to criticize, eager to silence other opinions. That is then Diotrephes, in contrast to the welcoming nature of Gaius. Matthew 23, verse 12, whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. That's the opposite kind of behavior that we need to be developing in our hearts because, like it says in Proverbs 16, pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. That leads us to our other Demetrius. Shows up in verses 11 and 12. Demetrius presents to us a story of godly consistency, good reputation, grounded in truth, affirmed by others. There's great power in simply being a good person, a good example. He's not shown to us, oh, look at how eloquent he is. He's an Apollos, he's a Paul. Look at how prolific his writings are. Look at how many people he's influenced. Look at how much money he's given. No, he's just someone who has a great reputation because of the quality of his character. It is perhaps easy to think about it this way. It's somebody whose actions match their words so often that you become easy to trust. If you want a great Old Testament picture of this, read through Psalm 1. Psalm 1 goes as follows. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits at the seat of scoffers. Incrementally, he doesn't do the things that draw you into rebellion. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. He is like a tree planted by streams of water that yields its fruits in season, and its leaf does not wither. In all that he does, he prospers. The wicked are not so, but are like the chaff the wind drives away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor the sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For the Lord knows the ways of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will perish. He becomes that tree drawing from the waters that brings shade and sustenance to everybody else. It's similar to what is in Titus 2, where Paul admonishes and encourages Titus and says, show yourself in all respects to be a model of good works, and in your teaching show integrity, dignity, and sound speech that cannot be condemned, so that an opponent may be put to shame, having nothing evil to say about us. Demetrius' character is an example of that kind of expectation that Paul says to Timothy. And finally, then, we have our last person in the text. John, who doesn't really often spend a whole lot of time talking about himself, both in our reading of these letters and in other contexts, it seems a regular thing. He says, I have much to write to you, but I would rather not write with pen and ink. I hope to see you soon, and we will talk face to face. That reveals to us a little bit about whom John is. That personal connection was more important than writing a long letter, because he really just wanted to say it to them directly. It helps us understand that his relationship, beloved Gaius and he, these are close friends. Some level of deep commitment exists between the two of them. It is similar to how Paul writes to Timothy in 2 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 9. There he writes, do your best to come to me soon, for Demas, in love with this present world, has deserted me and gone to Thessalonica. Crescens has gone to Galatia, Titus to Dalmatia. Luke alone is with me. Get Mark and bring him with you, for he is very useful to me in ministry. Tychicus I have sent to Ephesus. When you come, bring the cloak that I left with Carpus at Troas, also the books, and above all, the parchments. Bring me something to read and bring me something because I'm cold. But mostly bring yourself. John's leadership, John's encouragement is not limited nor even specifically noted to just be about correcting error and teaching truths. John is demonstrating what relationships look like. He models in a very particular way how those who lead in homes, in business, and in congregations need to balance truth with love in tender and appropriate ways. Paul even does this in 1 Thessalonians chapter 2 when he writes there in verse 7, but we were gentle among you, like a nursing mother taking care of her own children. So being affectionately desirous of you, we were ready to share with you not only the gospel of God, but also our own selves, because you had become very dear to us. So 4 fellows are telling us a story of faithfulness as they face any number of challenges. So on an application side, just to remember, one of the great things that Gaius teaches us is the value of living spiritually. How our spiritual health does impact our choices, and it allows us to do things and share in things well beyond our immediate space. And so maybe the bar is looking at your upcoming schedule and thinking, when's the next gospel meeting somewhere? How can I be there? Maybe I got to go all the way across the town to do so. Maybe I need to go to another state. Or maybe I just need to show up at Eastside the next time we have a special event and say, all right, I'm here for all the things that God can do with my time, small and big. Then expand your world a little bit and think about, what else can I do to be hospitable? How can I be someone to encourage? Maybe it's inviting some people over to the home just to make some packages and gifts for others who need a little encouragement. Maybe it's praising and supporting those who do that. Maybe it's all the spaces in between. But remember, there is a slight admonition and warning there. No matter whom you are, the danger of being Diotrephes is still there. Even, and probably especially, if you think you don't have that kind of influence. Pride still precedes a fall. That's still the reality. The truth of the gospel, then, is helping us kind of capture and understand that there's more going on than just, okay, this is a system of belief or a series of, I agree this is true. It becomes a way of living my life. It's not just about, oh, I checked off these boxes. I did the things that God said for me to do. It helps me understand my community around me, the church, my families, and maybe even the mission of the kingdom. In a practical way, then, find someone to encourage this week. Be hospitable to them. Invite them into your home. Share with them their work. Encourage them. Even band together to do so. Find a way to be a co-laborer in the gospel. Let's pray together. Heavenly Father, please guide us so that we live in truth. Help us to show hospitality and mind our hearts so that pride does not overtake us. Help our lives to reflect your love and your faithfulness to us. We offer this prayer in your Son's name.